A rave is an all-night party and dance that consists of music genres such as house, techno, and drum and bass. The earliest origins of rave go back to the 60s, which was the decade of the hippies, who played a key part in the growth of rave culture. Hippies were a subculture that travelled across Europe and America. They gathered in fields on a spiritual journey where they experimented with sex and drugs with the hope to find peace and free love. The rave scene increased around the 1980s, particularly in places like Chicago, where it became predominantly underground. The late 80s to 90s London and Manchester saw the emergence of underground clubs and raves. They were seen as transgressive due to the emphasis on drug use and ecstatic dance. Raves were seen as a place where people came together no matter what race, gender or background to share the dance floor and the experience. The rave scene increased around the 1980s, particularly in places like Chicago, where it came predominantly underground. The late 80s to 90s London and Manchester saw the emergence of underground clubs and raves, which were seen as transgressive due to the emphasis on drug use and ecstatic dance. Raves were seen as a place where people came together no matter what race, gender or background they came from to share the dance floor and the experience. Ecstasy, MDMA and Ease are all names of the most common illegal drug used among ravers. Originally used in pill form, however, often used in powder and crystal form in more recent years. The drug is associated with and produces feelings such as euphoria, energy, self-acceptance, a close connection with others and appreciation for surroundings such as light, touch and sound. Sarah Thornton uses her term subcultural capital, derived from bourgeois cultural capital, to explain club and rave culture. Subcultures provide a sense of belonging, and rave culture grants individuals with accepted social status. This status could be linked with, as Thornton suggests, having fashionable haircuts and well-assembled record collections. This gives them the subcultural capital and increases interaction and solidarity between the group. The 1990s were a time of rapid social change and the uprising of right-wing politics, where ravers were classed as deviant and constructed as folk devils. Under Thatcher's government, capitalism and poverty increased. This led to social polarisation, exclusion and protest. Individuals were looking for new ways to live. These lifestyles were all about hedonism, pleasure-seeking and refusing to accept the capitalist ways that were being pushed onto them. In George Mackay's book, DIY Culture, Party and Protest in 90s Britain, he emphasises how there was a disenfranchised youth and marginals that were left out of Thatcher's revolution. So, they created their own do-it-yourself culture, resisting neoliberalism globalism. Mackay found out about how dance and rave played a huge part of this counterculture. Free raves offered them a positive, alternative lifestyle compared to the unemployment and the restrictive freedoms in the society that they were in. These new ways of living created huge moral panics. This could have been due to the fact that these free raves became very large-scale and widespread. They often caused some disturbances to local residents, and they took place in derelict buildings, warehouses and big empty fields. The raves were seen as freedom and escapism from mainstream society by the individuals taking part, where they created their own moral codes and there was no authority or social order. Rules and laws were not put into place, meaning the raves could reach this alternative utopian paradise they were after. An example of this was the Stonehenge Free Festival. It was a large-scale countercultural festival that took place in the 1970s through to the 1980s. However, the English Heritage achieved a High Court order which imposed a 4-mile exclusion zone around Stonehenge. The convoy of New Age travellers and ravers protested this exclusion zone, which led to the police redirecting the convoy by using harsh and brutal riot methods. Travellers and ravers were harmed in the process and later won lawsuits against the police. The Avon Free Festival was held at venues around Bristol following the ban of the Stonehenge Free Festival. Police aimed to get rid of the ravers heading towards these festivals, with many of them assembling at Castle Morton. However, a week-long festival did take place where up to 40,000 ravers attended. There was a media focus of interest about this, which created moral panics about rave, drugs, and travellers. Festivals like the Castle Morton one played a crucial part in how the media and politicians were portraying the ravers. Even the public opinion became that of the ravers were a deviant subculture who behaved bad and immorally. This led to John Major's Conservative government wanting to create a new moral climate to counterbalance this, made up of family values and moral responsibility and a rejection of the hedonism and the hedonistic behaviours that were displayed by the ravers. During the early 1990s, it was the ecstatic and euphoric rituals and religious routines of non-Western religious cultures that were having an impact and being connected to raving. Cultural globalization has meant that religious symbols such as pagan and Celtic ones, and ones that were appropriated from Hinduism and Buddhism, became familiar totems among the rave scene. In Graham St. John's book, Rave Culture and Religion, he is focusing on an era of post-traditional religiosity, particularly New Age movements and spiritualities. He examines raving and notes how it is alike to new religious movements and revitalization in the way that it is transgressive, and how ravers have a lived bodily experience, a practice and tradition that is similar to world entheogenic rituals. Shamanism, a spiritual way of life, became a key influence in particular rave scenes such as trance and tribal. Techno-shamanism is something that has developed from the traditional and non-Western rituals of shamanism, the ancient spiritual practices of indigenous cultures. Techno-shamanism is using modern technology with shamanic practice to engage in altered states of consciousness. For example, the music created by the DJ at the rave and the substances used to allow the tribe to share different levels of transcendence and higher awareness with ecstatic dancing and music. The Criminal Justice and Public Order Act came into place in 1994. One of the aims behind this act was targeted towards rave and travelling communities, making large-scale outdoor parties illegal. The act gave power to the police to get rid of convoys that trespass on private land. Other sections of the act focused on the plan to be able to clamp down on illegal raves, defined as gatherings on land with 100 or more people, and music depending on the time and duration. Different sections of the Act focuses on different parts of the transgressive rave culture and how the police can prohibit and control it. The equipment used to create the rave, such as sound systems, can be seized by police. If the raves are held on private property, then the ravers can be arrested. The area that is used for the rave can be classed as trespassing if it causes disturbance or is on significant or historical land. These laws and policies have made free parties and raves very difficult to happen. The stigma attached to these individuals and the way they have been portrayed by the media and the government have meant that they can't always fulfill this alternative lifestyle they aim to achieve. Modern rave takes place in legal and controlled environments where profit is made by the companies running these events. Although there is a sense of unity and a love among these raves, they are part of a mainstream capitalist consumer society. Fabric is a club in London where individuals go to rave. Due to the type of music that is played, the dress code and the substances that are taken while there, Islington Council debated and for a short time closed down the club due to, in their argument, the amount of drug-related deaths that took place in relation to the club. This shows us how even when it's contemporary rave that is legal and in a confined environment, it is still seen as transgressive. To conclude, studying rave culture is interesting because it highlights certain issues found among transgressive subcultures, such as the tribal and non-Western cultural influence that was put on these subcultures and kept them together. Also, the way that crime and pleasure-seeking come hand in hand and the moral panics this created, which led to laws and policy preventions and sanctions, and how in turn it changed the modern rave scene.